Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Merrick Vaughn stared at the legal papers in his hands, the words blurring together as his mind processed what he was reading. Court summons. Back child support. Failure to provide adequate financial support for minor child Jude Vaughn. The irony tasted bitter in his mouth. He had never missed a payment. Not once in a year since the divorce was finalized. Every month, like clockwork, he transferred money to Laney's account. Beyond that, he paid for Jude's school supplies, soccer cleats, doctor visits, and half the cost for summer camp. His phone buzzed. Laney's name appeared on the screen. Did you get it? Her voice carried that familiar smugness he had grown to despise. I got it. Merrick kept his voice level controlled. What's this about, Laney? You know exactly what it's about. Jude needs more support. I can barely make ends meet. Merrick walked to his kitchen window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Rain drummed against the glass. I pay you every month. On time. It's not enough anymore. Rent went up. Groceries cost more. Jude's growing out of everything. Then get a job that pays more than part-time retail. Silence stretched between them. When Laney spoke again, her tone had shifted to the wounded victim voice he knew too well. I'm doing my best here, Merrick. I'm a single mother trying to raise our son. The least you could do is help without making me beg. Our son. The words hit him wrong, like they always did. Something in his chest tightened, but he pushed it down. Where's Jude now? At Nikki's. What? I want to talk to him. He's fine. Stop trying to control everything. Merrick gripped the papers tighter. I'm not trying to control anything. I want to make sure my son is okay. Your son is fine. Your wallet is what needs attention. The line went dead. Merrick set the phone on the counter and read through the court documents again. According to Laney's filing, he had failed to provide adequate support for Jude's needs. She was requesting an increase in monthly payments and reimbursement for expenses dating back 6 months. Numbers didn't lie. Merrick pulled up his banking app and scrolled through the transfers. Every month, without fail. He screenshot each transaction and saved them to a folder on his laptop. 20 minutes later, his doorbell rang. Through the peephole, he saw Jude standing on his porch, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. Rain had soaked through the boy's hood. Hey, kiddo. Merrick opened the door and stepped aside. What are you doing here? Jude shrugged, not meeting his eyes. Mom said I should come talk to you. About what? She said you might not want to see me anymore. The words hit Merrick like a punch to the gut. He knelt down to Jude's eye level. Why would she say that? I don't know. She was crying after she got off the phone with you. She said maybe you don't want to be my dad anymore. Merrick studied his son's face. Jude had always been too smart for his own good, picking up on adult tensions that should have sailed right over his 9-year-old head. Your mom and I have some grown-up stuff to work out. That has nothing to do with you and me. Promise. I promise. They spent the evening playing video games and ordering pizza. Merrick helped Jude with his math homework and listened to him talk about his science project on volcanoes. Normal father-son stuff that felt anything but normal with court papers sitting on the kitchen counter. When Laney came pick up Jude, she stayed in her car and honked the horn. She didn't look at Merrick through the windshield as Jude climbed into the passenger seat. See you Thursday, Merrick called to his son. Jude waved through the back window as they drove away. Back inside, Merrick poured himself a drink and called his lawyer. She's doing what now? Shiloh Cruz's voice crackled through the phone speaker as Merrick detailed the court summons. Back child support. Claims I'm not providing enough. That's ridiculous. You practically support that kid single-handedly. Merrick rubbed his temples. Can you come over? I need to think this through. Already in my car. His sister arrived 30 minutes later with a bottle of wine and Tuck Sloan in tow. Tuck worked construction and had been through his own messy divorce 2 years prior. If anyone understood the games ex-wives played, it was him. Let me see the papers, Shiloh said, settling on Merrick's couch. Tuck cracked open a beer from the fridge. How much is she asking for? Double what I already pay her. Plus back payments for stuff she never told me about. Shiloh scanned the documents, her expression darkening with each page. This is garbage, Merrick. Pure manipulation. Tell me something I don't know. Tuck leaned against the kitchen counter. Why now? What changed? I've been wondering the same thing. Merrick joined them in the living room. She's been different lately. More desperate. More willing to play dirty. Different how? Shiloh asked. Last month when I picked up Jude, I could hear her on the phone with someone. She was crying, begging them not to leave. When I asked Jude about it later, he said some guy named Derek had been staying at their place, but moved out. Tuck snorted. So her boyfriend dumped her, and now she needs more money. That's what I'm thinking. Shiloh set the papers aside and looked directly at her brother. Merrick, we need to talk about the elephant in the room. What elephant? You know what elephant? The one you've been ignoring for 9 years. Merrick's jaw tightened. Don't. I'm going to say it, because someone has to. You caught her cheating, and you never did anything about it. The room fell silent, except for the rain against the windows. Tuck looked between the siblings. Wait, what? Shiloh ignored him, keeping her focus on Merrick. You found those messages on her phone. You knew she was sleeping with someone else, and you still stayed married to her for 3 more years. I stayed for Jude, and now she's using that against you. Again. Merrick stood and walked to the window. The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked glass. What's your point, Shiloh? My point is that you've always wondered, haven't you? About Jude. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Tuck shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Of course I've wondered, Merrick said quietly. But wondering and knowing are different things. So find out. It doesn't matter now. He's my son. Does he look like you, Merrick? The question hit him harder than he expected. He turned to face his sister. What kind of question is that? An honest one. Does Jude look like you? Does he act like you? Does he remind you of yourself at that age? Merrick thought about his son's dark hair, so different from his own sandy brown. Jude's brown eyes that matched neither his nor Lainey's. The boy's quiet, thoughtful nature that seemed to come from nowhere. It doesn't matter, he repeated. It matters if she's been lying to you for 9 years. It matters if she's using a child that isn't even yours to extort money from you. Tuck finally spoke up. My ex tried to pull something similar. Claimed our daughter needed expensive therapy that insurance wouldn't cover. Turns out she was pocketing the money for a vacation with her new boyfriend. Carson started to object, but Judge Hollowell held up a hand. Continue, Ms. Serrano. Your Honor, we believe this motion is frivolous and motivated by factors unrelated to the child's actual needs. However, given the accusations being made, my client requests that the court order a paternity test to establish biological parentage before any support modifications are considered. The courtroom went silent. Lainey's face went white, and Carson looked like he'd been slapped. Your Honor, Carson stammered, this is an outrageous attempt to establish the truth. Blythe interrupted. If Mr. Vaughn is being asked to increase support for his biological child, then paternity should be confirmed. Judge Hollowell looked directly at Lainey. Ms. Ridge, do you have any objection to a paternity test? Lainey's mouth opened and closed like a fish. This is humiliating. Jude is his son. We were married when he was born. That's not what I asked. Do you object to the test? Carson leaned over and whispered urgently in Lainey's ear. She shook her head. No objection, Your Honor. Very well. I'm ordering genetic testing for all parties. The court will arrange for testing to be completed within 14 days. We'll reconvene when the results are available to address the support motion. Judge Hollowell's gavel came down with finality. Outside the courthouse, Lainey confronted Merrick on the steps. How could you do this to Jude? I didn't do anything to Jude. I asked for the truth. You know he's your son. Merrick looked at her with cold eyes. Do I? Lainey's confidence cracked. Of course you do. We were married. We were trying to have a baby. We were married. Merrick agreed. But you were also sleeping with other people. Carson grabbed Lainey's arm. Don't say anything else. But Lainey jerked away from him. I made one mistake, Merrick. One time, and it didn't mean anything. One time that I know about. I never lied to you about Jude. You've never told me the truth about anything. Merrick walked away, leaving Lainey standing on the courthouse steps with tears streaming down her face. The DNA testing took place at a medical facility downtown. Merrick, Lainey, and Jude each provided cheek swabs while a technician explained the process in clinical terms that seemed to make everything worse. Jude kept asking questions that neither parent wanted to answer. Why do we need this test, Dad? It's just something the court requires, kiddo. But why? Lainey jumped in. Because your father is trying to hurt me. Merrick's eyes flashed, but he kept his voice level. That's not true, Jude. Sometimes courts need extra information to make decisions. After the test, Merrick took Jude for ice cream while Lainey went home. They sat in a booth at the ice cream shop, Jude picking at his sundae. Are you still going to be my dad after this test? The question hit Merrick harder than he expected. I'll always be here for you, Jude. No matter what. Promise? I promise. But even as he said it, Merrick wondered if it was a promise he could keep. Later that evening, Tuck came over with takeout and beer. How'd it go today? Like getting punched in the gut repeatedly. Merrick opened 2 bottles and handed one to his friend. Jude kept asking why we needed the test. What did you tell him? The truth. Sort of. That courts sometimes require extra information. They ate in silence for a while, watching a baseball game on TV. You ever think about that night? Tuck asked during a commercial. What night? The night you found those messages on Lainey's phone. You called me, remember? You were so angry I thought you might do something stupid. Merrick remembered. He had been ready to confront Lainey, to demand answers, to blow up their marriage right then and there. But Jude had wandered into the kitchen in his pajamas, asking for a glass of water, and Merrick had looked at his son's sleepy face and made a different choice. I chose to keep the family together. And now I'm choosing the truth. Tuck nodded. About time. The next day, Merrick drove to his sister's office. Shiloh worked in HR for a tech company downtown, and he found her in the break room microwaving leftover pasta. How are you holding up? She asked. I've been thinking about things. About the timeline. What timeline? Merrick sat down across from her. Jude was born in March. If he's mine, that means Lainey got pregnant in June the year before. Okay, remember that weekend she disappeared? Said she was going to that work conference in Portland? Shiloh's fork stopped moving. The one where she forgot to charge her phone and didn't call for 2 days? That was June. Merrick, I looked it up. Her company didn't have any conference that weekend. I never called to check at the time because I didn't want to seem controlling. Shiloh set down her fork. Did you find out where she really went? I'm working on it. Merrick pulled out his phone and showed her a photo he'd found while cleaning out old boxes. Remember this guy? The photo showed Lainey at a party, laughing with a tall man with dark hair and brown eyes. His arm was around her waist in a way that suggested familiarity. Who is he? Reed Maddox. He worked with Lainey at her old job, the one she quit right after Jude was born. Shiloh studied the photo. Jude has his eyes. I know. Have you tried to find him? He moved to Montana about 8 years ago. Started his own construction business. Merrick, if this guy is Jude's father, he deserves to know. First, let's see what the test says. But even as Merrick said it, he realized he already knew what the results would show. Looking at the photo of Reed Maddox was like looking at an older version of Jude. The call came on a Thursday morning while Merrick was debugging code at his home office. Blythe's voice was carefully neutral. The results are in. Can you come to my office? Just tell me. Not over the phone. Can you be here in an hour? Merrick closed his laptop and drove downtown through the Seattle traffic. In Blythe's office, he sat across from her desk while she opened a manila envelope. The test confirms that you're not Jude's biological father. The words hung in the air. Even though Merrick had expected them, hearing them spoken aloud felt different. The probability of paternity is 0%, Blythe continued. There's no margin of error. Merrick stared out the window at the city skyline. After a long moment, he spoke. When do we go back to court? Tomorrow morning. Judge Hollowell will read the results into the record. And then we proceed with your countermotion. Lainey has no grounds for increased support from a man who isn't the child's father. What about Jude? Blythe's expression softened. That's the hardest part. The court will need to determine what's in his best interest going forward. I want to be there for him. I know you do. But legally, your obligations change once paternity is disproven. That night, Merrick couldn't sleep. He walked through his house, looking at photos of Jude on the walls. 9 years of soccer games, birthday parties, bedtime stories, and homework help. 9 years of being someone's father. His phone buzzed with a text from Lainey. Please don't do this to us. He deleted it without responding. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Word had somehow gotten out about the paternity test, and spectators filled the gallery. Merrick kept his eyes forward as Judge Hollowell entered and called the session to order. "I have received the results of the court-ordered paternity test," she announced. "The test shows that Mr. Merrick Vaughn is not the biological father of Jude Vaughn." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. At the plaintiff's table, Laney started crying. Carson looked like he wanted to disappear. "Your Honor," Carson said, standing unsteadily, "my client maintains that Mr. Vaughn has acted as the child's father for 9 years. Regardless of biology, he has legal and moral obligations. Mr. Vaughn has no legal obligations to support a child that isn't his," Judge Hollowell interrupted, "especially when that fact was concealed from him through fraud." She turned to Laney. "Ms. Ridge, did you know at the time of your marriage that Mr. Vaughn might not be your son's father?" Laney's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear, but she pushed him away. "I thought he was," she said through tears. "I really thought he was." "That's not what I asked. Did you know there was a possibility he wasn't?" The silence stretched until Laney finally nodded. "Yes." Judge Hollowell's expression grew stern. "Then you have committed fraud against this court and against Mr. Vaughn. Your motion for increased support is denied. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for possible prosecution for perjury and fraud." She turned to Merrick. "Mr. Vaughn, while I understand your anger, I hope you'll consider what's best for the child who has known you as his father." Merrick stood. "Your Honor, I've provided for, protected, and prioritized a child that was never mine. She used that against me to manipulate and extort me. I'm done being manipulated." The judge nodded. "The court understands your position. This case is dismissed." Outside the courthouse, Laney caught up to Merrick on the steps. "Please," she begged, "don't abandon him. He loves you." Merrick looked at her with eyes that held no warmth. "You should have thought about that before you decided to weaponize him against me. I never meant for this to happen. You knew exactly what you were doing. You've always known." Laney grabbed his arm. "I'll do anything. I'll pay you back every penny. I'll admit I was wrong. Just don't walk away from Jude." Merrick looked down at her hand on his arm, then back at her face. "You thought I'd forgive you like I always did. You thought I'd roll over and pay because I wouldn't risk losing Jude." He pulled his arm free. "You were wrong." 3 days after the court hearing, Merrick sat in Blythe's office again. This time, he wasn't there to defend himself. "I want full custody," he said. Blythe looked up from the paper she was reviewing. "Merrick, the paternity test showed." "I know what it showed. I also know that Jude has lived with me as his father for 9 years. I know that Laney has been psychologically manipulating him, trying to turn him against me. I want custody. That's going to be complicated." "Why?" "Because you're not his biological father. The court will prioritize reuniting him with his actual father once paternity is established." Merrick leaned forward. "His actual father abandoned him for 9 years. I raised him. His actual father didn't know he existed. Then we find him and see what he wants to do." Blythe made notes. "Do you have any leads on the biological father?" Merrick pulled out the photo of Reed Maddox. "Reed Maddox. He worked with Laney about 10 years ago. He lives in Montana now. I'll have him tracked down." Blythe studied the photo. "In the meantime, what about Jude? Have you told him about the test results?" "Not yet. I wanted to have a plan first. He's going to need counseling. This is going to be traumatic for him. More traumatic than living with a mother who lies and manipulates." Blythe nodded. "Point taken. I'll file for emergency custody based on emotional abuse. Do you have evidence of manipulation?" Merrick pulled out his phone and played a voicemail Jude had left the night before. "Dad, Mom keeps asking me weird questions about you. She wants me to tell the judge that you don't really love me and that you're mean to her. But that's not true. She said if I don't say those things, you might not want to see me anymore. I'm scared, Dad. Can you call me?" Blythe's expression hardened. "That's coaching a witness. It's illegal. There are more messages like that. Send them all to me. We'll file for emergency custody tomorrow." 2 days later, they were back in Judge Hollowell's courtroom. This time, Laney looked panicked. Her confidence from the previous hearings had evaporated. "Your Honor," Blythe began, "we're requesting emergency custody of the minor child based on evidence of emotional manipulation and psychological abuse." She presented the voicemails, text messages, and documented instances of Laney coaching Jude to lie about Merrick. Judge Hollowell listened to each piece of evidence with growing disapproval. Ms. Ridge, she said when Blythe finished, these recordings suggest you've been coaching your son to provide false testimony to this court. Carson stood shakily. Your Honor, my client was simply preparing her son for the emotional trauma of... Your client was suborning perjury from a 9-year-old child. The judge turned back to Laney. Do you deny making these statements to your son? Laney looked around the courtroom desperately. I was trying to protect him. From what? From being abandoned by the only father he's ever known. By teaching him to lie under oath. Laney started crying again, but this time it looked different. Less calculated, more genuine desperation. I was scared, she whispered. Of what? Of losing everything. Judge Hollowell studied her for a long moment. Ms. Ridge, I'm granting temporary custody to Mr. Vaughn pending a full investigation by Child Protective Services. You will have supervised visitation rights pending the outcome of that investigation. Laney's sobs echoed through the courtroom as the gavel came down. Reed Maddox arrived in Seattle on a Thursday afternoon. Blythe's investigator had tracked him down in Billings, Montana, where he ran a successful construction company. He was 40 years old, divorced, and had no children. When Blythe showed him Jude's photo, his face went white. He looks exactly like I did at that age, Reed said, staring at the picture. Are you willing to take a paternity test? Yes, but I want to understand what happened first. They met at Blythe's office. Reed sat across from Merrick, both men studying each other with curiosity and caution. I remember Laney, Reed said. We worked together for about 6 months. She was married, but she said she was having problems with her husband. We were having problems, Merrick confirmed. I just didn't know she was solving them by sleeping with other people. It was just one weekend. She said she was thinking about leaving you, and I made a mistake. What happened after that? She quit her job about a week later. Said she was going to work things out with her husband. I never saw her again. Reed looked at Jude's photo again. If he's my son, I want to know him. He's a good kid, Merrick said quietly. Smart, funny kind. He loves soccer and science projects and bad jokes. You raised him well. I tried. What happens now? Blythe leaned forward. We confirm paternity, then work out a transition plan that's best for Jude. This doesn't have to be adversarial. The paternity test confirmed what everyone already knew. Reed Maddox was Jude's biological father. When the results came back, Reed asked to meet his son. I don't want to confuse him, he said, but I'd like him to know I exist. They arranged to meet at a park near Merrick's house. Jude knew he was meeting someone important, but he didn't know why. Reed approached carefully, his hands shoved in his pockets. When Jude looked up at him, the resemblance was unmistakable. Hi, Jude. I'm Reed. Hi. Jude looked between Reed and Merrick. Are you a friend of my dad's? Reed glanced at Merrick, who nodded encouragingly. Actually, I'm your biological father. Jude frowned. What does that mean? Merrick knelt down beside his son. Remember how we talked about the DNA test? How sometimes families are more complicated than they seem. Jude nodded. Reed is your birth father. He didn't know about you until now. Jude looked at Reed with curious eyes. You didn't know about me? No, buddy. If I had known, I would have been here. Are you going to take me away from Dad? Reed's eyes filled with tears. No, I just want to get to know you if that's okay. Can I still live with Dad? That's up to the judge, Merrick said. But Reed and I both want what's best for you. They spent an hour at the park, Reed learning about Jude's interests and Jude asking questions about Montana and construction and what it was like not knowing you had a son. When it was time to go, Jude hugged Reed goodbye. Will I see you again? If you want to. I do. Meanwhile, Laney's world was falling apart. Without Merrick's support payments and facing potential criminal charges for fraud, she couldn't afford her apartment. Nikki Sharp, her best friend and enabler, had distanced herself once she realized the legal implications of being associated with Laney's schemes. Laney moved into a studio apartment across town and took a second job waitressing at night. Her Instagram posts, once full of fake success and happiness, became sparse and desperate. The custody hearing took place on a rainy Tuesday morning. Judge Hollowell had reviewed reports from Child Protective Services, court-appointed counselors, and recommendations from all parties involved. This is an unusual situation, she began. We have a child who has been raised by one man for 9 years. only to discover that another man is his biological father. Both men want what's best for the child, and both have legitimate claims to consideration. She looked at Merrick. Mr. Vaughn, you have been this child's father in every way that matters for 9 years. You've provided stability, love, and guidance. Then she turned to Reed. Mr. Maddox, you are this child's biological father, and you have expressed a sincere desire to be part of his life going forward. Finally, she addressed Laney. Ms. Ridge, your actions have created this situation through fraud and deception. While you remain the child's biological mother, your credibility as a parent has been severely damaged. Judge Hollowell reviewed her notes. After careful consideration, I'm awarding primary custody to Mr. Vaughn, with significant visitation rights to Mr. Maddox. Ms. Ridge will have supervised visitation pending completion of court-ordered parenting classes and psychological evaluation. Relief flooded through Merrick. Beside him, Reed nodded approvingly. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm ordering that Mr. Maddox be allowed to establish a relationship with his son gradually, with the support and cooperation of Mr. Vaughn. The child's welfare must come first in all decisions. She banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Reed approached Merrick. Thank you, he said, for raising him right, for not trying to keep me away from him. He deserves to know his biological father. Just be patient with him. This is a lot to process. I will. And Merrick? You'll always be his dad. Biology doesn't change that. 6 months later, Merrick stood in the doorway of his new house, watching Jude and Reed work on a tree house in the backyard. Reed visited every other weekend now, and the transition had been smoother than anyone expected. Jude called Merrick Dad and Reed, though sometimes he slipped and called Reed Dad too. Both men were fine with that. Laney had completed her court-ordered programs and had regular supervised visits with Jude. She was working 2 jobs and living in a small apartment, but she seemed to be rebuilding her life without the lies and manipulation that had defined her marriage to Merrick. Shiloh knocked on the front door, carrying a bottle of wine and a folder. Celebration time, she said, holding up the wine. What are we celebrating? The final divorce papers came through. Everything's officially settled. Merrick took the folder and flipped through the pages. It was finally over. There's something else, Shiloh said. I brought something for you. She pulled out an old photo, their wedding picture from 10 years ago. Laney looked radiant in her white dress, and Merrick looked young and hopeful. I thought you might want to burn it. Merrick looked at the photo for a long moment, then walked to the fireplace. He lit a match and held it to the corner of the picture, watching as the flames consumed the image of their life together. As the last of the photo turned to ash, Jude burst through the back door. Dad, Reed says he's going to teach me how to use power tools. Is that safe? Merrick asked, ruffling his son's hair. Probably not, Reed said, following Jude inside. But it'll be fun. That evening, after Reed had driven back to his hotel and Jude was asleep, Merrick sat on his front porch with a beer, watching the sun set over Seattle. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I'm sorry. For everything. I hope someday you can forgive me. Merrick read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. Some bridges weren't meant to be rebuilt. He thought about the man he'd been a year ago, angry, betrayed, trapped in a web of lies he'd helped maintain. That man had been afraid to ask questions, afraid to demand truth, afraid to risk losing what he thought he had. This man was different. This man had fought for the truth and won. Merrick smiled for the first time in months, a real smile that reached his eyes. He learned something important over the past year. Sometimes the only way to win a rigged game is to stop playing by someone else's rules. Some people confuse kindness for weakness. Some lied to survive. And some survived a win that he hadn't chosen this war, but he'd sure as hell ended it.